Hi crafty friends, Shana from ShanoukiArt. Welcome back to my channel. This is a no-sew journal. If you hate sewing or it makes you nervous to try and sew your pages into your journal, this is a fuss-free, easy, beginner-friendly, step-by-step tutorial. In part 2 of this video, I'm going to take you also on a step-by-step journey of how I decorate this journal. But for today, let's just see how we're going to put it together. This project works great with any paper that you're going to use, whether you're using a printable kit, scrapbook paper, junk mail, old book pages, sheet music, anything. So it's perfect to make with anything that you have in your stash. And you can make it any size you want. This technique was inspired by Amity Bloom. She is on YouTube, and I will link her channel in the description box below. So first we're going to need the papers that we're going to put into our journal. I've gone through all my things and pulled out the colors that are going to suit my journal. I've also collected all the little bits and bobs I'm going to use for decorating, and I'm just going to keep that to the side for part 2 of this video. I'm using a combination of papers. I'm using magazine papers, junk mail, sheet music, scrapbook paper, and I am also using some pages of a printed kit. The kit I'm using is designed by my sister from Nectar's Creations. It is called the Shabby Chic Market Peach and Lime. I love the colors. I'll put a link to her Etsy store in the description box below. I have printed my kit on plain white paper and I've left the back plain. I'm not coffee staining it, but I'm going to show you how to cover up all that white. So we're going to start by folding our pages in half, and I'm not cutting mine down to any specific size. It's sort of just going to be an A4 folded in half. Some pages will be a little bigger than the others. Personally, I don't mind if they're slightly different sizes. But of course, if you want yours to be measured exactly, you can cut down all your papers to be the same size. And then just go through and fold everything in half. You'll notice the edges of my paper are quite rough. My printer prints with a white border, which I like to cut off. And I actually just use a ruler and tear that off because I do like that rough look. But of course, you can use a cutter or scissors to cut off your white border if that's how your printer prints. And just another note for printing digital kits, if you are going to coffee stain them, you will need to use a laser jet printer. Inkjet printers make the color run and bleed when you dip them in your coffee or your tea. The toner from a laser printer is permanent. I also have this brown envelope that I'm going to add as part of my pages. As you can see, it is quite a bit smaller than the other papers that I'm using. I do like the variety. I also have a page from an encyclopedia. I also have a piece of sheet music. This is vintage sheet music. I love it because it has the tape on the side, which has caused that darkening, and there is some foxing on the paper. I love a mix of new and old. Now, you can put as few or as many pages as you want, but for this type of binding method, the more pages you put, the less sturdy it will become, and you'll see why as we progress and I show you the binding method. I will explain that. So I'm thinking about 10 to 15 papers is probably the best. And when I say papers, so it's 10 or 15 papers that you will fold in half. So once folded in half, that is 20 to 30 journal pages and 40 to 60 writing sides. I think I folded more than I used because I wanted to alternate the printed kit with the plainer papers. So I just sort of folded a bit more than I needed. I ended up using 9 pages, which I folded in half, which made 18 journal pages. And this includes the envelope that I used. So we have the pages for the journal. Don't worry at this point, you can always add more or rearrange the order. Nothing is confirmed yet. We're now going to work on covering the white pages on the back side of our printed kit. This part, of course, is not mandatory. If you like the white papers and you want to leave them in, that's perfectly fine. Maybe you want to journal in them or do some doodling, whatever is your style. You could also be coffee staining or tea staining your papers. which is what I normally do. This is just a different idea to cover up the blank pages on the backside of a digital kit. So in essence, all I'm really doing is just doing a very basic collage. So I've got elements that suit the theme of my journal. I've got greens and oranges and vintage colors and some black and white. And I'm just going to stick these elements down to cover the area. We are going to later on, when we are decorating the journal, cover some of this up. We're going to put some pockets. We might do some art journaling or stenciling. This is just the basis to start. And this is part of prepping the pages for the journal. Another way you could do this is just to cover the entire area with a scrapbook paper or maybe another digital print if you don't print double-sided. You don't have to do it in collage format, you can just stick one big piece. Even a colouring in book page would work. I'm just sticking paper to paper at the moment. I'm using a glue stick for this. And I'm using a combination of old brown packaging, that stuff that they sort of put in the boxes when they send you a parcel. I've got some book pages. I have some pianola paper. This is a great way to use up also scraps. If you have little bits that you don't want to throw out, you can just add them to this. And don't worry about perfection. We are going to add to and enhance the pages later. This is just the base. This flower is from an old catalogue, from a scrapbook catalogue. And the flowers just suit the theme of my journal really well. I like my journal to have a theme, not very strict, like it doesn't have to be everything exactly the same, but I like there to be continuity in my journal, so I try to use the same elements multiple times throughout. So you'll see me sticking to the same colors and tones, but each page will be different and unique. So I'm just going to continue now, sticking down my little bits of collage. Just a note, like most of my long form videos, and especially in videos like this where there's a lot of repetitive work, but I do want to show you the entire process. I'm not going to talk through the entire thing. I'm going to talk when I'm explaining something or a technique. And if I'm doing the same technique over and over, I'm not going to explain that multiple times. I will, however, show you what I'm doing, so you can be on the journey with me. So there will be parts of the video where there will be silence. No, the video is not broken or faulty. I just don't believe in talking for the sake of talking. I like to talk when I'm explaining something. And I leave the silence because music is really a very personal preference. And I don't want to spoil anyone's experience. So what you can do is play your own music while you're watching my video. Maybe you've got the TV on in the background, maybe your favorite podcast, or maybe you do just enjoy the quiet. For this page, I'm not going to do it in collage. I'm going to cover the entire page in this pianola paper. So that'll balance out the busyness of the collage. We'll have some plainer elements, so there are some calm pages between the busyness. Here I have this wording from the magazine. I'm not going to use the actual wording. I just like the curls and the font they're actually using and the light green. So I want to put a section of that down. It doesn't matter that you can't actually read what it says. It's more the design that we're looking for. I spoke about continuity earlier, and one way of doing it is I'm going to put that same lettering from the magazine that I used on the previous page. I want to put a section on this page too. Again, you can't read what it actually says. It's not the full wording, and it's not even in the green background, but it has a continuation because it's got that same font. It's subtle, but it connects the pages throughout. I'd also like to emphasize that at this point you shouldn't be stressing about what you're placing down on your page. This is meant to be a relaxing and calm creative process. It's meant to calm you and it's meant to be enjoyable. If you're finding that it's stressing you out, maybe leave it for a bit and maybe work on something else. But just remember, we're not looking for perfection. Most everything or anything can be fixed, and after all, it is just paper. You can see that I place the pieces down and then stick almost immediately. I'm trying not to overthink it. If the piece fits, let's stick it down. We are going to add to it later. So all our printed sheets now have a collage of sorts on the back side. You'll notice that I have folded some with the printable on the outside and some with the printable on the inside. That's just for variety as we're paging through the journal. We're now going to put our papers in order of how we want them in our journal. And we're stacking them one on top of the other. We're not opening them up and putting one inside the other like a regular signature. This is a different binding method, remember. I didn't end up using this very last page, but I wanted to show you how you can use two separate pieces of paper to make one page. So if you have two pieces of scrapbook paper that are an offcut, you can literally just masking tape or tape them together like this, fold it in half, and you have a double colored page that you can add to your journal. I originally liked the colors of this and thought I would add it. In the final thing, it didn't actually make the cut, but you can make bigger pages from smaller pieces of paper. At this point, I still thought I was going to use it, so I've just added it to the back of my paper stack, and now I'm going to page through it as if I'm paging through my journal so I can see if the order I've put them in is what I'm happy with. So just put them all together and page through it. You can shift and move the papers as you want. You can add more, you can remove, whatever makes you happy. Just another reminder, they're going on top of each other, not inside each other like a regular signature. The next step is to create the strips of paper that we're going to use to bind our pages together. Again, here you can use any papers. I'm going to go with papers I've already used in my page prep. They can be any width you want, as wide or as thin as you want, but I wouldn't recommend them being too thin, as this is what's all that is holding your pages together. I think between 2 and 3 inches is perfect. Before we measure the actual length that we need, we're just going to tear the strips and get those ready. You can use all the same papers for your strips if you want it to be discontinuous through your journal. I'm going to use different papers. I want the variety, as my journal is quite a mix of different kinds of papers and designs. So you'll just need to count how many strips you'll need. You need one for the front page, one for the back, and then one for each of these double pages. So I'm also going to have strips that are the printed kit, and you'll see soon how it all fits together. I usually also cut more strips than I need, so I have a variety to choose from when I'm going from page to page and just see what suits that section best. So now we have all our strips, we're going to start sticking our pages together. We're going to start with the first and second page. And I'll find it easiest to fold my strip in half long ways. This strip is going to join the left and the right pages together. I'll find it best if it is the length of the shortest page we're working with. So I'm going to apply glue stick to my strip. And then I'm going to stick the strip down, aligning the fold that I created with the fold of my page. And then I'm going to cut it to size. I'm then going to apply glue stick onto the other half of the strip and then attach it to the page on the left. And this is what is going to keep these pages together. Try to align it as much as you can. The less gap you have, the tighter the journal will be. Of course, again, it's not going to always be perfect, but just do your best to get the pages as close together as possible. We're now going to repeat the process with the next two pages. Choose the strip you're going to use, remembering we're always going to make the strip to suit the shortest page on that section. Again, I'm going to fold it in half, just because it makes it easier to line everything up. Apply the glue and then stick it to my pages. You can cut it down to size before you glue it down. I've done it I think both ways with this journal. I started off by only trimming it after I have applied it to the page because I was a little scared I'd cut it maybe a little too short, but you can do it whichever way you find easiest. It was a little trickier because this page was shorter, but I think if all your pages are the same length, it'll be much easier to trim. Using this exact same technique, I'm going to glue in all my strips to attach all my pages to create the inside of my journal. I will show the video for one more page attachment and it'll be at a slightly higher speed, and then I'm going to skip ahead to the next part of the journal making. This page attachment is the same, it's repetitive, so I'm going to not bore you to death because we have quite a few pages to put the strips into. What I am going to stop and note just here is with this envelope, because of the way it is attached, it's going to be open like all the way through. and it's going to be sort of, your items will get lost inside. So I decided just to run the sewing machine down the center, so it sort of creates two separate sections. So any ephemera that you put inside won't get lost all the way inside the envelope. It'll probably make a little more sense when I am decorating all of this, but for now, let me just reattach this. Thankfully, the strip came off pretty easy. I am going to add a small piece of masking tape for aesthetics and to hold everything in place. So this is my last page going in. And this is what it should look like once all your strips have been placed and all your folded pages have been put together. So when I flip through it at this point, you can see how the strips are holding the pages together, and the idea of how to attach pages without sewing. Whoops, a little bit of wet glue, but that's okay. Not too much damage done. The next part is making the covers. Now there's multiple ways to do this. For this video, I'm going to create a separate front and a separate back cover. And I'm going to use a good old cereal box. Great way to recycle. Now the covers need to be quite sturdy, so I am going to use the cereal box double. Normally I just use one piece for my other journals, but for this one specifically, I am going to stick two pieces together for the front and two pieces for the back. To make these pieces more manageable, I'm just going to cut them in half. And straighten some of the edges. This is where I'm going to now measure the size cover that I need. I'm going to put my paper stack over the cardboard and just measure about 1 millimeter or 2 bigger than my papers. I like my cover pretty snug with the inside of my journal. It's all personal preference. I'm then going to cut each piece, each of the 4 pieces, down to size. Once the first one is cut and you're happy with the size, you can just use that one as a template to measure the other pieces. I just do a pencil marking all the way around, well down the one side and the bottom, and then just cut it with my cutter. Again, we're not looking for perfection. This is all going to get covered. As long as it's basically aligned, we're good. And when that is done, we'll have these 4 pieces of cereal box that will soon transform into a front and back cover. I'm going to stick them together with double-sided tape. You could also use craft glue or Mod Podge, whatever you have that can hold them together. I'm also going to add a small amount of craft glue just to make sure that everything stays in place. And then place the 2 pieces together. Repeat on the second 2 pieces. I'm going to cover each piece with a base paper. I'm going to use this pianola paper. It's quite neutral and I love that it has a little designs on, so if anything peeps through, once I put all my other elements on top, it adds a lot of interest in the background. So I'm not going to cut this down to size and then stick it on. I'm actually going to wrap it sort of how you would be wrapping a present, because I don't want you to be able to see the edges all the way around my cover. You'll see sort of that grey underlying cardboard. So I think this is a good way to cover that, and you will be able to see this all the way around. You can see me trying to see which way is best to make full coverage with this paper. And then I started off with glue stick and then realized I probably need something a bit more sturdy to hold everything in place. So I added a bit of Mod Podge to stick all this down. So adding the adhesive to the one side, I'm placing it flat onto my paper, and then I'm going to fold the other pieces up and over. And remembering this is the cover, so we are going to decorate it and add additional elements. This is just the base. I'm then going to fold the corners over and then stick that down. Like I said, I'm doing it like I'm doing, well, how I would wrap a present. So I'm going to put a little bit of glue to keep these little corners down, and then I'm going to put a piece of masking tape for two reasons: to hold it in place and also because I like the aesthetic. I'm going to repeat the process for the other cover. I'm going to fold the corners over and tuck them in. It's okay if it's a little bit chunky. I do like that in my journals. You can always cut this flush if you don't want it to be bulky. So I've made the base of both covers exactly the same. I really love the way this looks, and then when you're done, you're going to have two covers that look something like this. Now the fun part, we're going to decorate the covers. This is 100% personal preference. You do it how you like. I'm going to show you my way. I love adding quite a lot of different layers, and I do love some chunky elements to my covers like flowers. And I really build as I go. I don't always have an idea of what the final product is going to look like. I just keep adding layers and different elements, and I sort of let the pieces guide me. I do use elements that I'm going to use in my journal on the covers too. So I'm going to cut out some of the beautiful florals from the printed kit, which will look really, really good on the cover. And then once I'm happy with the elements, I stick them down. This sort of works in layers. So this would be the first layer. Things may or may not go on top of all of this. But for now, I'm happy with this, so I'm going to put it all into place. So this one ended up being the back cover. And what I decided to add to this one, just for some texture, is some texture paste through a stencil. And I have the stencil which looks like vintage script. I really love this stencil. And I'm going to do a little bit of texture paste through this, just in certain parts, which really help elevate it. And also it adds a beautiful lightness to the overall feel. I love the way that looks. I'm going to add a little bit more at the top using a different stencil. And now what I'll probably do going forward when I'm decorating the inside of my journal, I will use these stencils in there too in different ways, maybe with texture paste, maybe with ink. But that's again how I create the continuity, by using similar elements. And I know I'm going to get questions on the stencil because I always do, and I cannot get the stencil again. I bought it from the reject shop here in Australia before COVID. So that was like maybe 2020, many years ago. And they do not actually stock stencils or very many craft supplies anymore. And I cannot find it anywhere online. I wish at the time I had bought more, because they are starting to wear. I think I've got 2 of them, but they are starting to break up a little bit. And I'm quite heartbroken because they are one of my favorite stencils. If I ever find them again, I will definitely share with everyone where they are from, because everyone always comments on them. So I stuck down 3 pieces of collage paper, well 2 pieces of collage and a flower, and then I added the texture paste, and I think that looks pretty amazing. Simple but very effective. Now we're going to work on the front cover. Just a note, this is a few days later. I didn't film this video all in one go. It is quite a few hours, and I worked on this project over multiple days and weeks. So you're not expected to finish this project in one go. I think the total filming time for me was 4.5 hours. So it took that long to create the 2 covers and to join all the inner pages, and then to join the inner pages to the cover, which we'll do at the end of this video. The vintage lady that I'm using on the cover is just a postcard. It's not a real vintage piece, it's just a copy. And I found it in my stash along with some other ones. I think I bought it quite a few years ago online. I can't remember from where. If I do remember, I'll put it in the description box below. I just love the way she looks. I think it just suits the style of my journal, and it makes for a great focal point on the cover. I'm just working now on building the different layers and just seeing what looks best, and trying to also add a little bit of color and to create balance. I'm going to add laces and fabrics to this journal, and I have some fabric ruffles. You can see them on the left. It's meant to be a peachy pink. It looks quite pink on the video. I will show you how to make those in the next video. But I do like my journals, and especially my covers, quite chunky and full of 3D elements. So fabrics, buttons, flowers, and I love lots and lots of layers. You can decorate the cover of your journal at the end after you've decorated the inside. It doesn't really matter. I tend to do my cover first. That's just the process that I use. And the way we're going to attach these covers to the pages sometimes does affect what you're putting on your cover. But of course, you can still do it after the attachment or before, like I have. I think flowers are really great for filling spaces and finishing pages off. These digital prints that I have got beautiful vibrant flowers that I find myself cutting out quite often to use here and there and everywhere. It's a great pop of color and really adds to the overall aesthetic. After much back and forth and adjusting and readjusting, we're going to start gluing these elements down. Before we do that though, I want to rough up the edges of my photo. It's a nice thick cardboard, so I can do it quite easily. I just use an open scissors and scrape along the edges, and it roughs it up, makes it look really worn and used. I also tear it sometimes and roll back some of that paper. It gives it more of a vintage feel, adds additional texture and great dimension. And then this photograph doesn't just lay flat on the cover. I'm going to add a few pieces of vintage tape. It always gives it that bit of something extra. You can make this yourself, and I have a tutorial on how to make it. I will link that tutorial in the description box below. I've also gone around and sort of curled up any papers or paper corners. I've curled them up and made it just look a little bit more worn. You really can just push it up with your finger. I love my elements sort of coming off the page. And this is my journal cover. Remembering we can always add additional elements going forward, even once the journal is complete. We may have another burst of inspiration or a new idea. It's never too late and you can always just keep on adding. So then I brought my inner pages and my two covers together and had a look at them and decided that yes, I was going to add a little bit more to the cover. I'm going to add some of that texture paste that I have on the back cover onto the front just to create that cohesion, and I think that additional white will also lighten up the cover. So this was a little tricky as I already had all the other elements stuck down, but I managed to get it right. This one did smudge a bit. I didn't have the stencil down flat, so I'm just going to use a baby wipe just to wipe down that chunky section that is a bit blurred. The top part of it looks okay though. And now for the inside of the covers. I'm going to keep this very simple. I'm going to stick just one thing of something on each one. These pages are from an old Daphne's diary. The colors work great with my journal and the size is perfect, so I'm just going to stick them directly onto the inside covers. Again, we can add to these later. Now it's time to attach the inner pages to our covers. And we're going to use the same system we did in the beginning by using a strip of paper, and one half of that strip will go onto the first page of our paper stack, and the second piece is going to go on the inside cover. Folding it in half for ease of alignment. Try and get the cover as close as you can to that first page, so there is a minimal gap between the two where the paper joins them. Repeat this for the back cover. So everything now is attached and our journal will look something like this. The spine of this journal though is not very sturdy. It's really just a stack of folded papers attached with more paper. So we need to reinforce this. I'm going to do this with a thick piece of lace. You could also use regular lace, fabric, or another piece of paper. And the idea is we're going to stick this from on the front cover down the spine and to the back, and that will hold everything together. This is why we said earlier that the thicker the book, the less sturdy it's going to be, because then it'll just get a bit more wobbly the more pages you have. A smaller, thinner book will be held tighter together with this fabric or lace. So I started with a clear craft glue, and then you'll see I move on to Mod Podge, but I've applied some clear glue onto the cover, just a small section, because I'm going to only have a small amount of lace showing on the front of my cover, and then I'm going to press my lace down. I'm going to trim my lace now. You can also trim it once you've finished sticking everything down, which is maybe a better idea in hindsight, because sometimes lace tends to shift and move a little bit and not always be aligned, but it did work fine. We're now going to apply our glue to the spine, to where all the page folds are together. You need quite a bit of glue here to make sure everything holds well. I'm using Mod Podge and quite a thick layer of it, and I'm applying it with a paintbrush directly onto those folded pages of the spine. And then you're going to pull your lace or fabric up nice and tight and press it against all that Mod Podge. Try get it as flat as possible so you have a nice, clean, flat spine. And then apply the glue or Mod Podge to the back cover. You don't need a very thick layer here, just a regular layer. And then press the fabric or lace or paper down to close off the spine. So my lace is losing its shape a little bit as I pull the edges. I personally don't mind, as long as it's nice and tight and my book won't fall apart. And then you'll leave this to dry, preferably overnight or for a day or two, to make sure it is properly dry, because all of that glue was pretty thick. And then for my closure, I'm just going to use a piece of fabric. It's just like a white cotton. I don't have a super long piece. I'm just going to attach two shorter pieces together, just with a knot. I don't care that you can see the knot. I want it quite long because I want to wrap it around my journal a couple of times. A few finishing touches on my back cover. I'm adding a piece of that vintage tape to match the front. And this, my crafty friends, is my completed journal. I really hope you enjoyed this video and were inspired to create your own no-sew journal. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the little bell so you're notified every time I upload new content. You don't want to miss the video where I show you how I decorate the inside of this beauty. Thanks again for watching. Happy creating, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.